big passion of ours is, helping people age in place. And aging in place can happen at any age, at any time in life. And sometimes it doesn't really hit us until something's happened that's beyond our control, that's been unexpected. And so that's where a lot of times I feel myself um, empathizing with a lot of people in, just in any stage of life, because it's kind of what happened with my father. So when I get to meet people who are going through the same stages that I went through with my family, and I can help work with them through those same processes is where I kind of find my joy. And I think the person that kind of has stood out to me was a woman named Judy, who fierce, independent, wanted to do it on her own. And we wanted to support her journey to do it on her own because it kind of reminded me of my father and my parents. So something unfortunate had happened. A fall had happened that kind of put her into the hospital, took everyone by surprise because you don't plan for a fall, you don't plan to break something. And so that's kind of what happened in my personal story. So I was kind of almost reliving what happened to my family, happen with this family. And so and this happened with my family when I was in a different age and stage of my life. And I've gained all these tools and knowledge, and engaged with the community around me to better help other people in this scenario. So unlike the circumstance that happened with my family, and in passing away, I was actually able to help her find the tools and resources to actually gain strength. So we were contacted while she was still in the hospital, just to help her just get in the house. How do I even get in my house? So, we go on a ramp, but we start asking more questions. Who's here to support you? How are you doing with just keeping up with your daily activities, cleaning, cooking? Because, a hoarding situation started to happen. We saw that there was no food in the refrigerator. So we, where do you like to spend most of your time? We started learning that we're pretty much secluded to one or two rooms in the house. So when we were able to get Judy home and into her house, we were able to kind of help educate and connect her with someone just in the community, just to help check on, do you got your groceries? Do you have some easy things you can pop in the microwave? Okay, how are you getting to your doctor's appointments? Setting up with, even just a community transportation, or even members of her church, reaching out to her support system who would even come to her for her social engagement. And then, being therapists, having therapy come in. Someone will come to your house. They will come to you. Same with even medical professionals like primary care physicians. People start come to you. And so she just didn't know what resources were available. And so going from being wheelchair bound, stuck in, her bedroom and her bathroom of her house, and becoming fatigued, malnourished, weakened. There was constantly, easy to prepare meals in her fridge, and a therapist starting to come to her house. Went to go visit her not even 3 months later. We did, other stuff like to help her be safe in the house. And she was up walking with a 4-point cane, telling me about her latest like little girls. They come to her house from the church and they'll bring little, cookies or things like that. So about how she's just engaging more with her community, with her friends. She's up and moving. So this is my favorite story of kind of being in the area that I'm in, of seeing her progress not only physically and being able to enjoy her house again, but also, spiritually and mentally with friends. And so I always call and check in and see, how she's doing. And, she's been doing great. So, even just the smallest thing of going in and checking in and saying hi, can really help kind of put it could change someone's life. It
Hmm.
really can change the trajectory of their life. And I wish I was in the space that I was now then to know how to provide these supports, just even for my loved ones, to see, well, maybe the trajectory would have been different. But, you know, I feel that, he's proud of me and making sure that, I help others in the same situation be able to continue to find their joy and, be strong and be safe and continue to lead the life that they want to.
Well, hello, this is Don
And this is Gina.
with Focus Healthy Family, and today we're doing podcast number 162, and today we're talking with Dr. Caryn Fidalgo. I'll get it right. Occupational therapist and co-owner of Green Light Mobility. Caryn is an occupational therapist who's graduated from Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, with an occupational therapy doctorate. Caryn and Felipe have been fortunate to provide rehabilitation care for outpatient clinics, hospital-based inpatient rehabilitation, acute care facilities, skilled nursing facilities, as well as providing in-home therapy for geriatrics, adult, and pediatric populations. Their mission is to make living in your home a safe option despite life's challenges. So, Caryn, thank you for being part of this. I spotted your brochure some time ago, and I thought, oh, it's just so neat to be able to, well, like you just mentioned, that being able to take somebody's life and really turn it around and change it, I just find that amazing.
Yeah, so being in the healthcare field, we see kind of, if something happens, we don't want the first thought to be facility, facility, facility. We really want to help kind of change just the roles and the habits and the idea about, people can stay home and they can age in place successfully with the right tools and supports.
Hmm.
So we being therapists in the hospitals and the homes, and we just saw an overwhelming need to help kind of change that trajectory or, just provide an alternate path that maybe traditional, the healthcare system traditionally isn't quite thinking about, just to provide that additional pathway to see if aging in place is possible.
Sure. Yeah, your story is wonderful. It just not only did you provide the accessibility physically for her to get back in, but it sounds like, really improved her life, that she was able to do even more after, connecting her with community support, which is so important. And yet so many people become isolated, like you described.
Hmm.
And they're not taking proper care of themselves. They're not getting the nutrition they need. They're not sometimes not taking their medications, which leads to hospitalizations and falls.
Hmm.
So yeah, I just love what you're doing and the company and just it's yeah, more than just building a ramp. A lot of people, look at that as okay, I need a ramp. I can't manage the stairs anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, and we get a lot of those phone calls, especially maybe, if it's a social worker or something like that,
Hmm.
just they need to get in the house. Let's get them in the house. So we go in the house and, from going in and out of the house, like, how often are you going to be using this ramp? Because, we want to know about, or who is someone going to be pushing you up? Are you going to be able to do it on your own? Let's make it at a grade and a different layout so people can do it on their own to get in and out. And that's where we learn, like, I have these doctor's appointments, or I like to go to these social activities, or I still like to do, just, everyday activities, whether it's, going to get the mail and things like
Hmm.
that. So we start to learn kind of people's rules and habits and routines of just going in and out of the house. And then we go into the living room. What activities do you like to do here? We go into the kitchen. And so when we start to go into each and every room, we start to learn more about their lives and, what things that they enjoy to do or what things that they need to do, what supports that they need. So even though we just came in for a ramp and maybe a grab bar in the bathroom, we start to learn more about people. And then that's way how we can connect them with different other resources and kind of see the overall need. So
I would imagine because both you and your husband are um, in the field, occupational
Therapist,
therapists and all,
physical
and
therapist.
physical
mhm.
therapists, that you have a bit of I don't know if it's true, but a little bit of a step ahead of your kind of competition or whatever. Because like you say, you come in and you lay out the whole gambit of different things that they need to do versus just somebody like say that's just popping
The
a
build
ramp
a
up
ramp,
there or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, there, I mean, in any kind of space where kind of green light mobility is at, there is different kind of competitions or different companies that do what we do, but there's no company that is like us that is focused from kind of a healthcare
Hmm.
perspective and a mobility perspective and an occupation perspective, um, to really truly match some of these items to what people truly need, um, based on their roles, habits, routines. Do I have one side that's weaker than the other? What's my vision like? What's my cognition like? So there's a lot that goes into we're not prescribing, but recommending a lot of what we do. And, we'll be the first to also recommend people out of doing certain things because it's not quite safe.
Hmm.
So, that kind of sets us apart from, another company that'll just sell a product to sell a product. And you buy a
Yeah.
product and you're realizing this isn't working out how I intended to. And so we help people not only be safe, but end up saving money and saving time to make sure what they get is right.
Sure. I'm curious as an occupational therapist myself. I mean, we typically look at can you get in the house and then what's your bathroom setup? So I'm kind of curious, what other kind of areas do people not expect you to kind of be addressing? Kind of another.
I mean, we always look at, I mean, the highest rates of falls happen in the bathroom and
Mm,
anywhere that there's steps or stairs. So we always make those our main priority. But we will literally walk the house with them. I mean, I think one of, I mean, we've done, bars and pantries. We've done,
mm,
pulls and grab bars down a laundry room to help a woman like continue to do her laundry.
mhm.
And so it really we'll ask about every single part of the house that they use. Yeah.
Sure. I know for some people, I've worked in independent living settings where people have a pet to care for, whether it's a dog that needs walking or a cat and they need to clean the litter
Hmm.
box. And
Hmm.
so, things that not are not often thought about in the short-term process of rehab. Can I bend
Hmm.
down to the floor to feed my pet?
Hmm.
So I don't know if you particular story or something if with someone you've worked with where there was an accessibility. Um,
Like a
I
pet
worked with
issue.
someone who they used a pulley system
okay.
to feed, they had a dog. And so they kind of scooped it at the top and they used their pulley system and just kind of tipped it with their foot and then brought it back up. And so I mean, you name it, there's some sort of invention, idea that somebody has already thought of, that can help make any part of life a bit more accessible. I mean, even with utensils and dressing and magnetic shirts and things like that. I was talking to a gentleman, I did an evaluation, and we were talking about him getting dressed and using coins because his dexterity was an issue. So we did like a bidet because
Hmm.
so he was like, what the best thing that I have? He's like, I went out in my garage, pliers, like little needle nose pliers. He's like, I use those for my buttons and my coins
Mm,
and opening little tabs of you. He was like, if it works for you and you found something that works for you, then that's great. That's
hmm.
great.
I was kind of curious, do the other people that are other associates that you have in other areas, do they also, do they put, not mandatory, but do they talk about being occupational therapist in the practices?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's a big thing that makes us who we are,
Yeah.
being therapists, and we always want to address that too, to give people a sense of, I guess, comfort and trust and understanding that the information that what is coming at them is from someone who's, worked in the field, and also has gotten training, whether it's an OT or an advanced certificate with the certified aging in place. Yeah.
Hmm.
I noticed too that your husband has a specialty in certified aging in place specialist.
Hmm.
What is that? How does that play into it? And I guess kind of what it is. So I think we know a little bit about it, but just to tell our audience too about what that means.
So it's just an advanced certification that a lot of therapists, whether it be PT or OT, get that solely focuses on the home accessibility, the home modification piece. So it helps kind of better guide through, ramp configurations and layouts and
Oh, okay.
slopes. And then it, talks about, doing things like from a more of a construction background as well. So whether that be, widening doorways or, having ADA compliant toilets or barrier-free showers or, certain heights and widths of, doing an ADA vanity or, kitchen modifications, things like that. Yeah. So it just gives a little bit more education and background into specifically adapting a house to someone who needs adaptations for their mobility or their cognition or their
Hmm.
vision, anything.
So just you kind of touched upon it, but I was kind of curious as to how you evolved into getting to this versus doing the work in
Traditional work
homes or
as a,
whatever, traditional work.
I mean, so we were in traditional, clinics and rehab facilities and in home health. For myself, I was able to follow a particular patient from I was doing PRN in a hospital and then PRN home health, and I was able to kind of follow this individual from the hospital to home health. And in the hospital, rock star. He was doing phenomenal. But then as soon as we got home, I mean, we saw barriers even from getting into the front door, whether like being an OT in the hospital, we get all of our feedback from what, family member or the patient themselves tell you. This is, how many steps I have, or I don't have any steps, or yeah, I should get through my bathroom door, or yeah, my setup's kind of like this. And when you get to a house, the setup is never like the hospital. The hospital was designed to be, accessible for a variety of people. And so going to the house, we just started seeing barrier after barrier after barrier. And we kind of almost had to take a couple steps back to, okay, well, there are no steps to get into the house, but you have a pretty large threshold. And so we need to have a ramp here. Or, our bathroom doesn't quite fit the chair that we're in. We have to modify and see how we're able to get through our bathroom door. Or, our setup to fit this particular shower chair isn't working in the shower. We've got to come up with a different type or layout for our shower chair to put it in. So, it was a lot to go through with him of kind of creating this design. And then the next question that they ask is who's gonna do this?
hmm.
Now what? And I was like, all
Oh, yeah,
right,
that's
well,
true.
go find somebody. So, and and maybe people do, they'll go find somebody and they'll put, a grab bar up, but maybe that grab bar is, all the way up here and not an appropriate space. Or maybe this is our affected side and we need something on our opposite side. Or maybe they just kind of Google, go on Amazon, kind of buy and try, buy and try, buy and try, and which takes up time and money and resources. So we're like, well, there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be a way that we can kind of mend these two worlds together. And so that's kind of how we found Greenlight Mobility and decided it's something that we wanted to do.
And within your company, what kind, how many different, like you have carpenters, I guess, and other. You mentioned on there other therapists. So do you have other therapists that are part of your group too, besides just occupational and
Well, just occupational physical therapists.
oh, okay.
Just, to be the most appropriate fit to, what our company provides, to, truly understand, the processes of aging and, disability and things like that. Because sometimes when we go into a house, a lot of people aren't stagnant in the stage that they're in. It's always going to progress, or unfortunately, there's some, neurological conditions like Parkinson's or MS or ALS, things like that, where we can understand this is their journey in this moment. This is where they are in their journey in this moment, but we need to be thinking, okay, what's our next step? What's our next step? So we just find that having therapists is the best person to be on their team for the home accessibility part. And we work with a lot of outside therapists as well too, whether it be in the hospital systems, whether it be the home health therapist. We want to make sure we talk to, the person who knows them best, is the expert in that person. And that includes the person themselves, that includes their caregiver, whoever's taking care of them, as well as, their medical team as well.
Sure. I'm curious, as far as contractors, people coming in doing the physical work, does Greenlight employ those people, or are you have resources you reach out to as far as contractors?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, for our main, installations, we employ our own guys, our own carpenters and technicians and installers. And then, we do have our own crew that we kind of have for, be doing something larger. So they'll go out and there, do demo and do a barrier-free shower, replace toilets, widen doorways, things like that. But then if there's we walk in and we see kind of other situations that are impeding the accessibility. So think of like a hoarding situation. We have different contacts, who work in organization and junk removal. Or maybe we need to put a vertical platform lift in, outside, but there needs to be something concrete for it to sit on. And, maybe we need to redesign a walkway. So we'll, connect with, masonry workers or concrete workers. So we do a lot in-house, but if there's something outside that needs to be done in order for us to do what we do appropriately, then yeah, we'll kind of work with our trusted resources to get that done too. Electricians, HVAC, plumbing, yeah.
That's great. And knowing that there's employees and people that you work with all the time, because that's often a big thing. People hire a contractor and they don't know what they're going to get. How can I trust this person? Especially the elderly, they're so prone to scams and different things and being taken advantage of. That, yeah, having a company like Greenlight, I just love that it's kind of all encompassing, and that they can really put their trust in you. A lot of people come to trust therapists. They've worked with them in the hospital. They're the person who gets them out of bed, gets them moving, and they're grateful for that. And so just building that trust with them. And I imagine that makes a big difference in the success.
It does. And I think, it just makes sense to employ our own guys or gals. I'm saying a girl can do this too.
Okay.
Because we want to make sure that, our therapists and our crew are having that conversation with each other. This needs to be here for, X, Y, and Z for this individual. And, and then we also have them saying, okay, well, from a construction standpoint, from an install standpoint, this is what we recommend. And then how do we make sure that matches versus going and finding someone and then again, doing something that's not completed or something that's in the wrong space or wrong area. Yeah. So it's not useful or functional.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, my father survived Parkinson's for 17 years. And when he was still at home with my mom, she was putting a grab bar on the wall. And, you can look up the recommended height, but my dad was on the short side. He had his
Hmm.
stooped posture and shrunk him over the years.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, no, let me let dad get in here and stand here, because it was kind of a little lower than you traditionally would put a bar for him
Hmm.
because of
Hmm.
his height, and vice versa if someone is really tall. Yeah, kind of those
Yeah.
special things into consideration that it does matter in what direction to put the bar, uh,
Hmm.
can make
Yeah.
such a big difference. So,
It does. Yeah. So, we talk a lot about, I've mentioned it too, like ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, they have their own kind of general outlines and codes of what you see maybe when you go into a public restroom or in a public space where you see that ramp. When you go into a residential home, you want kind of like what you said, what's going in to fit that particular user, because we're not creating a space for the public masses, so we can kind of adjust placements and heights to make sure it's in a spot where it's going to be used appropriately. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I'm one to always notice when I go into a handicap accessible bathroom, and the toilet paper, is really low, and I'm thinking about someone with hip precautions, and that's not really accessible. And
Yeah.
and you're right, you can't. It's hard to make a one size fits all situation for people. And even facilities I've worked at, I'm like, they need a therapist to come in here when they build these buildings because they don't always, yeah, have things in the right place and the right accessibility. So there's such that personal component, which I really love. I'm curious just as far as
I'm gonna
funding.
step up to the dog.
Oh,
Just
our
you
dog
guys keep
is
talking. I'll be right back.
our dog is scratching to get out the door. Um, so I know for a lot of people, these services are out there, but cost. Is there anything as far as funding support that you found? Um,
So there are different supports funding wise. I will say majority is going to be kind of out of pocket or private
mhm,
pay. I think
mhm.
one of the first questions we get is, does my insurance cover this?
Right.
And I'm not an insurance professional, so I always say call your insurance company. But I can say from our experience working with a lot of individuals, kind of what we found has been covered and not covered. So for example, like your traditional original like Medicare, even a lot of Advantage plans, they will not cover what this is because per Medicaid, it is not used to treat a medical condition.
Mm,
We'll give you a wheelchair because you physically cannot get around, and you need to
mm,
be able to get around to do a lot of your toileting and bathing and daily activities to prevent infection, things like that. But we won't give you a ramp to get through or a grab bar to help you transfer or anything like that.
mhm,
So, if anybody has any kind of private or supplemental, I always tell them just ask and see
mhm,
because you never know. If people have
mhm.
long-term care insurance, depending on there's different policies out there, but a lot of policies will pay for home
Oh,
modifications.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times they'll just use kind of our quotes. Maybe like, the doctor writes up, they need X, Y, and Z due to whatever the reason may be,
Mhm.
and it, gets approved and we can do the work. There are different waiver programs with Medicaid.
Okay.
So I can talk specifically in like North Carolina. Every different state has their own different, policies and programs within Medicaid, but specifically in North Carolina, there's a few different waivers. There's a waiver for CAPC, which is for children 0 to
Mhm.
21, or there's CAPDA, which is for adults. It just is a waiver to have home modifications done for safety and accessibility. In North Carolina, there's also the innovations waiver. So it's used more so for individuals with some sort of intellectual disability
Okay.
that can be paired with a physical disability as well. If they qualify for that, then home modifications can be covered under that waiver. Through the state of North Carolina, there is something called um, vocational rehab and independent living. who also do provide funding for home accessibility through the state.
Mhm.
So depending on what state people are in, there are different ways for this to get paid for. If an individual has a certain diagnosis that is correlated with maybe a fund or a society, maybe the MS
Mm.
Society or TBI, or
Mhm.
there's different societies out there who will grant money for some of
Mhm.
these things. So we've done some things for that, different groups. Other funding sources might be, local churches,
Right.
local nonprofits. So it's just kind of reaching out to the community and seeing what resources are available for funding too. But I don't know if traditional health insurance will kind of get on board, at least with a ramp and some grab bars. I
Sure.
mean,
Well, even the VA does those
the
kinds of
VA,
things for people.
yes.
Do you guys work any with the VA or do they employ their own people to do work?
So the VA, yes, we can go out and do kind of VA projects.
Oh, you
There's
can.
like the
Okay.
HISA grant through the VA. So it's a grant for doorway windings, bathroom modifications, things
Hmm.
like that. The VA will also like contract different companies to do
Okay.
ramps and stair lifts and things like that. So the VA, the route has to start through the VA. It's typically
Hmm.
you have to go see your VA appointed doctor and they have to approve, yes, you need this. And then, from there, it kind of,
So it can come to you from that source, though.
it can, yeah.
Okay.
Or sometimes people find us first.
Okay.
And
And
then
then
I
they
kind of give them
back
the,
them up.
the information that I'm giving them. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they go meet with their doctor and things like that. So, you know, because a lot of times we'll come up on that Google search and people
Okay.
don't quite know exactly what services or benefits they could qualify for.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
That's good to know because I know a lot of people, the VA will pay for so many things, but I've heard people say it can take forever to get the work done. And
Yes.
so knowing
Well,
that,
it takes a while to go through the process because,
sure.
there are application processes, even all the plethora of through the Medicaid programs, the state programs, there's, you got to get your appointment in, you got to apply or submit it to get approval and come back. So the process can be long. So if people
Yeah.
start as early as possible, especially if, people see themselves, staying in their home for a
Hmm.
while, or if they already have some sort of condition, whether it's
Right.
vision related, cognitive related, physical related, just anticipate these changes as we age. Yeah.
Maybe we
Sure.
should start now.
Yeah. That's part of the reason we moved. I'm trying to find a house without steps that we have to go up and down.
I mean,
Um,
we were in a three-story townhome, and then we had our infant, and before I got pregnant. I'm not saying he did. And like I'm not doing this. I'm not doing like a car seat, bags, bait. I'm not doing all this. I'm not going up 3 flights of stairs. And so we found a one-story house, and I think we'll be here for a while. I kind of
yeah.
like it. And it's easier to clean. Laundry's easier. It just makes everything
Oh
easier.
yeah, we have a two-story, but everything we need is on the bottom. Our laundry, everything's right here. So we have our two
Yeah.
kids that kind of have their own apartment upstairs.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. If
And
you've
they're
got
old
everything
enough.
that you need on the
Yeah.
first floor, then you're fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So is there, as kind of wrapping up here, is there anything you'd like to recommend or advice to somebody that it might be starting down this journey somewhere? Just something that you've learned or through occupation or whatever that you'd like to share with us.
I mean, I think the biggest thing to stress is always kind of prevention. It really needs to be on everyone's mind. Everyone's aging, and with aging comes, a decrease in our mobility and a lot of our function. So even if we're not quite feel like we're quite at the stage, at least maybe go out, kind of explore, get the information. What can I do now? Because it doesn't big and overwhelming. A lot of people think home modification for accessibility, I'm going to turn my house into like a hospital or make it look like an institution. And it really doesn't have to. It really doesn't. A lot of what we do matches like the aesthetics of the house while also kind of preserving function too. So our biggest, you know, advice is to be proactive because the alternative is, slipping, falling in the shower. Nobody's there. You got to call EMS. How are you going to call EMS? Maybe somebody does, but last thing I want to do is have someone come in and pull us out of the shower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not my
Yeah.
job. So, and then after that, really being in the hospital, surgeries, a lot of that takes even a greater toll on our bodies of being, laying in a hospital bed for a time, a long period of time. You start to get muscle atrophy, so nobody wants to do that.
No.
No,
It
no.
doesn't
And
sound fun. So, if we can be proactive and kind of put our safety and accessibility needs in the forefront, then it can help save a lot of stress and anxiety, especially for kids. I worry about my mom a lot now that she's on her own. We did have, grab bars in the shower room by the toilet, and they are in a one story. When they moved to Charlotte, oh my gosh, it was the biggest thing. I went back and forth. When they moved here, I was like, find a one story. They did. She listened. So, even as kids, we worry about our parents. So for me,
sure.
it helps with my stress and anxiety of her living alone too.
Exactly. Yeah, a large part of our audience, is that in that place of caring for an aging loved one and thinking ahead. Yeah, that prevention is so important, although a lot of times that's not how people come to these terms and these decisions because people can be very stubborn as we get older. We can be more set in our ways and we don't want to leave that house and we don't even
Yeah.
realize the resources that could be out there. And that's why,
Mhm.
I wanted to bring up finances and resources that can be available because some people are like, I just can't afford it. Well, maybe there is a grant or something, if you're,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
And a lot of what we do, I mean, you might think, oh my gosh, all of our projects are going to be thousands of dollars and huge, but they're not. They're really not. A lot of times we're going in, maybe putting a grab bar by a toilet, maybe, two in the shower, and maybe raise up the toilet seat. Sometimes something as simple as that can make a world of difference, and they're not
mhm,
bleeding out of their pocket, or, we'll do a little bit here and there. So it can be done to help safety, not invade into the look of the house,
mhm,
and then not be something that's ostentatious. And, we stick to what people truly need.
mhm, mhm.
Well, Caryn, it's been wonderful having you here and some really good advice with good information. And so we really thank you for being part of this.
Yes, and obviously
Thanks
people
for
can
having me.
reach you through green light. I know behind you is your sign, but just to reiterate what
Mhm.
if they're listening, because this podcast is also, on podcast platforms that are only auditory. So just let people know how they can find out about you and your business.
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way is just to go to greenlightmobility.com. If someone's listening, in the greater Charlotte area, that's where we are located. We'll go all the way, north of Statesville down into Lancaster, Mountain Island, Morrisville, Albemarle. We have a pretty good area around Charlotte, but there are other kind of locations if someone's listening and they're, in Raleigh or in, Philly or Milwaukee. We have a few other locations as well. But we're always here to answer any questions, even if you're outside of our service area. We're happy to provide our guidance or our expertise. We always do a free home assessment. So our home assessments are always done by a therapist and it's always free. So if anything, we do employ people just to reach out and get the information, just take that first step.
That can be so helpful. Just, yeah, having that first step in those starts. Well, thank you so much, Caryn, for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning about green light mobility, and I'm excited to share. I'm still working PRN in a bunch different
Oh,
settings,
really?
and knowing I can share these resources with people, because and having a trusted person to come in and help support somebody, and just that free assessment. They're going to come home and make recommendations, and then you get to decide from there, right? No pressure
Mhm.
initially. So
Mm-mm. No, no.
thank you so much for being here. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. This is our podcast for today. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment, share this podcast with others that you may know. We'd love to help you and support you on your journey with caring for an aging loved one. Please check out our website, focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can see all the things that we do, including my Ask the OT segments that we do, the tapping that Don does with people, the energy work, and just providing other resources and information. And tune in other weeks. We broadcast these every Thursday. You can look back to prior podcasts. We've interviewed a lot of different people covering a lot of different topics related to this. So again, focusedhealthyfamily.com. We're on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family. Instagram is Focused Healthy Family 1. YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. Join us each Thursday for a podcast, and join every Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don does this free online tapping group. You can learn more about tapping and what that is, and just join in and learn more. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.